Morning mist hung over the affluent neighborhood of Newton. A cool breeze from the Charles River gently rustled the leaves of old trees lining Maple Street. In her Georgian mansion, Elizabeth Wilson was busy preparing breakfast. The aroma of blue bottle coffee and the sound of organic bacon sizzling filled the elegant morning air. With the soft creaking of walnut floors, her husband Michael approached from behind. His gentle kiss on Elizabeth's shoulder carried the air of a refined gentleman. Dressed in a Tom Ford navy suit, he was the epitome of a Wall Street elite. "Early start today?" Michael's voice carried a hint of sweetness. "Yes, I have a contract signing in Brookline today," Elizabeth smiled proudly. "It's a $35 million deal. One of Boston's most notable historic properties. As expected of Boston's top real estate agent." Michael smiled, seemingly genuinely pleased with his wife's success. Elizabeth had no way of noticing the calculation hidden behind his expression. His Patek Philippe luxury watch gleamed in the morning sun. In her Jaguar F-Pace driving along the Charles River, Elizabeth thought about her father. 3 years after his stroke, he still required constant care. The care journey had begun with emergency surgery at Brigham and Women's Hospital. The man who once led Boston's premier construction company now lay in a white hospital bed. Upon arriving at Champy's Care Center, Nurse Jennifer greeted her with her usual warm smile. In the special suite on the top floor, her father lay quietly by the window. "Dad, I'm here today too." Elizabeth held her father's hand as she told him about her day, the real estate contract, a new restaurant opening, how her mother was doing. Though he couldn't speak, he seemed to be listening intently to his daughter's voice. Around that time, something strange was happening with her sister Caroline. A promising nurse at Brookline Private Hospital, she suddenly quit her job. Her vague reason was wanting more time for herself. Since then, Caroline had started frequenting Elizabeth's house, carrying new Prada bags and clicking about in Jimmy Choo heels. She particularly came by more often on days when Michael worked from home. "I've started learning about investing. Michael's teaching me," her sister would say, her eyes showing an unprecedented sparkle. Though Elizabeth noticed changes in her sister's behavior, she tried to convince herself it was just work-related stress. However, the wheels of fate had already begun turning. One June evening, when Elizabeth returned home from a post-contract celebration, the house was empty. No messages from Michael, and Caroline couldn't be reached. With an uneasy feeling, she visited her father, where she learned the shocking truth. Her mother was waiting there, distraught. $20 million had disappeared from her father's safe. At the same time, Michael and her sister had vanished. All that remained was a $5 million bill on the Amex Black Card, sympathetic glances from neighbors, and gossip at the Longwood Country Club. The divorce was finalized 3 months after the marriage's breakdown. In the halls of the Massachusetts Supreme Court, Elizabeth mechanically signed the papers. She thought this would end everything, but reality was harsh. Michael, who had resigned from Goldman Sachs, had moved all financial assets overseas. Elizabeth was left with only mortgage and care facility payments. "Money can be earned again," her mother Martha tried to encourage her, but Elizabeth's wounds ran deep. The betrayal by her sister and anger toward her husband cast a dark shadow over her daily life. The Newton mansion had to be sold to repay debts. In its place, she purchased a condominium 10 minutes walk from her father's care facility at Champis. It was a fall from a $6 million estate to a $1.2 million residence. The Charles River was visible from her new home's window. Her former luxurious life now seemed like a dream. But Elizabeth had no time to stand still. Her father's care cost $20,000 monthly. Insurance covered only a fraction of the premium facility's fees. She threw herself into work. Up at 5 a.m., showing properties until 9 p.m. Even on holidays, she was consumed with emails and phone calls. As a luxury real estate agent, she was desperate not to miss a single contract. "Elizabeth, you're pushing yourself too hard," her mother worried, but she kept working. Deep down, she wanted to prove something to her sister and ex-husband. After 2 years of this lifestyle, she found her sister's Instagram post. Caroline and Michael in a 7-star hotel's royal suite, sipping $50,000 champagne. A blue ocean stretched beyond the balcony, and new Louis Vuitton bags lay casually inside. The next post showed a Monaco yacht party. The two mingled with celebrities on a 300-foot super cruiser. The caption of "Dream comes true." #Monaco Yacht Show #billionaire pierced Elizabeth's heart. Private shopping at Chanel's flagship store in Paris. Prada's new collection in Milan. Penthouse parties in Miami. The $20 million had become fuel for their luxurious escape. Why not report them to the police? They could issue an international warrant, her friend Jane asked, but Elizabeth just shook her head. She sensed her father knew something. His occasional sad expressions in the hospital room bothered her. 5 years passed, and Elizabeth had established herself in real estate. Known as a luxury property specialist with annual transactions exceeding $100 million, her name was recognized throughout the industry. She moved to a new luxury apartment in Back Bay and bought a new Mercedes-AMG G63. However, changes began appearing in her sister's lifestyle. Social media posts decreased dramatically. The few photos posted lacked their former glamour. Luxury brand tags disappeared, and locations were no longer premier hotels. Rumors circulated about a Hermès Birkin being pawned at a prestigious Madison Avenue shop. Following that, Cartier watches, Tiffany necklaces, and even Michael's beloved Patek Philippe appeared on the market. Bankruptcy rumors began spreading. An acquaintance claimed to have seen Michael in Monaco's financial district, wearing cheap polo shirts instead of luxury suits, walking with a tired expression. "I heard he tried to scam $20 million from an Arab investor and failed. They say Caroline spends every day at the casino." The rumors kept coming. Eventually, their posts ceased completely. The last photo was from a hotel in Casablanca, Morocco. All former glory gone, their faces showed anxiety and exhaustion. In early summer of the 10th year, her father's condition suddenly deteriorated. "Your father is critical. Please come immediately." Elizabeth rushed from an important contract negotiation upon receiving the call from Champis Care Center. However, she couldn't hear her father's last words. Her father's face looked peaceful as he closed his eyes quietly. As funeral preparations progressed, an email arrived from Caroline. Brookline Chapel was known as the most prestigious funeral venue in Boston's suburbs. June sunlight streaming through Gothic stained glass windows gently illuminated the custom ebony casket. Over 300 attendees, including Boston's business elite, came to pay their respects. Wilson Construction's directors stood in solemn lines. Harvard University officials, Boston Chamber of Commerce leaders, and local dignitaries gathered to pay final respects to George Wilson. Elizabeth sat with her mother Martha in the front family row. Her profile in a black Chanel suit was dignified and beautiful. Yet in her eyes burned a quiet flame of anger. Tension showed in her neck muscles beneath her scarf. The venue was adorned with elaborate floral arrangements. The combination of white Casablancas and purple calla lilies was her father's favorite. Their fragrance evoked nostalgia among the attendees. At 2 p.m., just as the funeral was about to begin, it happened. The chapel's heavy doors opened, revealing visitors unseen for 10 years. Two figures emerged in the incoming light. Caroline wore a new Chanel tweed suit. A large diamond brooch sparkled at her chest, and a Rolex date just shone on her wrist. Michael, too, was perfectly attired in a Tom Ford suit. However, despite their expensive appearance, something shadowy lingered in their expressions. Fatigue showed under Caroline's heavy makeup. Michael's hair had begun showing gray. The venue froze for a moment. A senior Wilson Construction director half rose. Harvard Club trustees exchanged glances. The two walked toward the front row as if it were natural. Caroline's Jimmy Choo heels echoed unusually loud. Her walk no longer carried its former grace. "It's been a while, dear sister." Elizabeth's body trembled at her sister's smirking voice. 10 years of anger surged within her. As she straightened her back and took a deep breath, her mother quietly closed her eyes. "You have nerve showing up." Elizabeth's voice was ice cold. Her father's old friend in the front row shuddered at her tone. "Of course we came. We're family too." Caroline answered as if nothing had happened. Her voice carried a somewhat resigned tone. The priest was about to announce the service's start. But Caroline continued speaking. Her eyes fixed on the memorial photo beside the altar. "About father's inheritance." She raised her voice, heedless of surrounding gazes. The well-dressed mourners held their breath. "It should be split 3 ways, right? Between us sisters and mother." The venue froze. Lawyers in the front row frantically checked documents. Murmurs arose among corporate executives. "How dare you!" Elizabeth's shout echoed throughout the chapel. The chandelier trembled slightly. "Have you forgotten what happened 10 years ago? Stealing $20 million from father's safe and running away. The past is the past." Caroline shrugged. The gesture carried a somewhat European air, perhaps from her days in Paris. "Besides, Michael took the money. I knew nothing about it." "Liar." Mother Martha restrained Elizabeth as she tried to stand up in emotional turmoil. Her mother's hands showed a slight tremor. "Calm down." Her mother's voice was surprisingly steady. It carried the weight of 10 years. But now Michael spoke up. Adjusting his tie slightly, he stepped forward. "Elizabeth, don't blame your wife." His voice had regained its former gentlemanly tone. His Goldman Sachs negotiation skills showed. "Divorcing you was the best decision I ever made. We simply weren't compatible. That's all." Hot tears rolled down Elizabeth's cheeks. Anger and sadness swirled in her heart. The pain of betrayal from 10 years ago stabbed her chest anew. Then it happened. "Don't you know the truth?" Her mother's quiet voice echoed through the venue. The chapel's atmosphere changed instantly. At the sudden question, Caroline and Michael's expressions froze. Color drained from their faces. "Mother." Caroline's voice trembled. The former arrogance had vanished from her tone. "That's enough." Martha quietly stood up. Her gesture carried the dignity from her days teaching at Boston's prestigious school. "I've kept quiet for 10 years, but let's end this." At that moment, the chapel doors opened again. 3 police officers quietly entered. The leading detective was the son of her father's old friend. "Mr. Michael Thompson and Ms. Caroline Wilson?" The detective approached the two. His footsteps broke the silence. "We'd like to ask you some questions." Color drained from Caroline's face. Her expensive makeup began running with sweat. Michael tried to flee but found his escape route blocked. Under the attendees' gaze, Mother produced a worn envelope. It bore her father's handwriting, to be opened in 10 years. Elizabeth recognized the writing. It was her father's last signature. Elizabeth couldn't believe the events unfolding before her. Why had her mother kept silent for 10 years? And what did her father know? All mysteries were about to be revealed. The 300 funeral attendees watched with bated breath. Sunlight through stained glass illuminated the funeral venue turned courtroom. Only the air conditioning sound broke the silence. The priest stood helplessly before the altar. Only her father's memorial photo seemed to quietly watch this bizarre scene. The envelope her mother produced had yellowed slightly over 10 years. It bore her father's elegant writing, to be opened in 10 years. Her mother's hands trembled slightly as she broke the seal. "Mother, that's..." Caroline's voice shook. Michael searched for exits with a pale face. "I'll tell you about that day." Mother began quietly. Her voice carried the weight of 10 years. 10 years ago, Father knew everything. Elizabeth caught her breath at her mother's words. That Michael was trying to sell company secrets. That Caroline was an accomplice, leaking internal information. And the plan to take $20 million in cash. The venue fell silent. Father already had evidence. Security camera footage, safe access records, and traces of overseas transfers. Everything was there. Mother slowly removed documents from the envelope. They contained evidence of the crime from 10 years ago. But why? Elizabeth's voice trembled. "Why didn't you report it to the police?" Mother sighed deeply. Father cared more about Caroline's future than the company's reputation. Tears glistened in Mother's eyes. If arrested, Caroline's life would be over. He wanted to avoid that at all costs. So it was settled privately? Elizabeth's voice echoed through the chapel. Yes. The $20 million was meant to be a final gift to Caroline. Mother smiled sadly. But that was a mistake. Caroline collapsed to her knees. Her expensive Chanel suit scraped against the floor. "Father." Her voice trembled faintly. And father made me promise not to tell Elizabeth the truth. Mother continued. He wanted Elizabeth to be happy, not trapped by hatred or revenge. That's what he said. Hot tears rolled down Elizabeth's cheeks. Her father's deep love now painfully clear. Father believed in Caroline's rehabilitation until the end. Mother pulled another document from the envelope. This is the will. Michael suddenly moved. He tried to run for the exit, but police officers quickly restrained him. All assets will be inherited by Elizabeth. Mother read the will. However, should Caroline show intent to rehabilitate and choose to contribute to society, I hope Elizabeth will provide appropriate support at her discretion. A deep sigh filled the venue. Father believed in me until the end. Caroline's voice echoed faintly. Yet I. Her makeup ran as black tears streaked her cheeks. Michael just hung his head while being handcuffed. This is Father's final message. Mother took out a letter. It contained her father's last words. To my beloved daughters. I've wondered every day if my decision 10 years ago was right. Elizabeth, I'm proud of your strength and kindness. Caroline, even after making mistakes, there's always a chance to restart life. You are both my precious daughters. I hope someday we can gather as a family again. Love, Father. Elizabeth received the letter with trembling hands. Her father's writing held deep love and sadness. We have arrest warrants. The detective stepped forward. Michael Thompson and Caroline Wilson, you're under arrest for embezzlement and breach of trust. Caroline quietly cried without resistance. Michael tried to speak but couldn't form words. Watching the two being led away by officers, Elizabeth looked at her father's memorial photo. She felt deep affection in his gentle smile. The trial at Massachusetts Supreme Court concluded in 3 months. The evidence was perfect. Beyond her father's materials from 10 years ago, social media posts documenting their luxurious life in Monaco and Dubai supported the prosecution's case. The verdict: 7 years for Michael, 5 years for Caroline. Plus an order to repay $20 million. After sentencing, Elizabeth requested to meet her sister. In Suffolk County Detention Center's visiting room, Caroline in an orange prison uniform had completely lost her former arrogance. Sister. I'm truly sorry. Caroline's voice was thin and trembling. Back then, I was jealous of everything you had. Your success, love, happiness. Elizabeth studied her sister's face through the glass. She now saw the deep loneliness she hadn't noticed 10 years ago. I plan to recertify as a nurse in prison. Caroline spoke, looking forward for the first time. After release, I want to work in hospice care. For patients like Father. Elizabeth teared up at these words. Her father's wishes were finally bearing fruit. Meanwhile, Wilson Construction embarked on a new journey. Elizabeth leveraged her real estate experience to launch a luxury senior care facility development business. A nationwide project modeled after Champy's Care Center. I want to continue Father's legacy in a new form, Elizabeth declared at the board meeting. The veteran directors saw traces of their late president in her eyes. Mother Martha spent peaceful days in her new home overlooking the Charles River. Elizabeth visited weekends to tend the garden roses together. I think Father would be happy. One day, Mother said while gazing at roses. That you're protecting the company. And trying to forgive Caroline. And trying to forgive. In autumn, change came to Elizabeth's life too. She met David Carter, a new professor at Harvard Medical School. Recruited as a medical advisor for her father's care facility development project, he was sincere and compassionate. "I'm fortunate to meet a woman with such strength and kindness," David said on the night he proposed. Elizabeth shed truly happy tears for the first time in 10 years. The wedding was held at St. Paul's Cathedral in early winter. Mother celebrated her daughter's new beginning with a radiant expression. Then, during Caroline's first year of incarceration, at Christmas, a letter arrived from Caroline. "Dear sister, prison life has taught me many things. As I study for the nursing certification exam, I'm relearning the value of life. Listening to other women serving time as accomplices, I realize my own foolishness. Father believed in me until the end. I must carry the weight of betraying that trust for life. But from now on, I want to make amends, little by little. I saw your wedding in the newspaper. You looked beautiful in your white wedding dress. Congratulations, truly. I hope someday we can gather as a family again. By then, I want to be a daughter Father could truly be proud of. Love, Caroline." After reading the letter, Elizabeth smiled at her father's memorial photo. "Father, Caroline is trying to change. You were right to believe in her rehabilitation." Outside the window, snow began falling quietly to herald the new year. In her penthouse overlooking Boston, Elizabeth held warm coffee and thought about the future. David read a medical journal beside her. Mother had promised to visit on the weekend. And in 4 years, her sister would be released. Perhaps someday, as Father wished, the family could gather again. It would be a new kind of family bond. Elizabeth gazed at the sunset reflecting on the Charles River and quietly prayed. "Father, please watch over us. Our family's new beginning." 2 years later, Caroline was released on parole for good behavior. Her first destination was Father's grave. "Father, I'm home." Caroline quietly wept while placing white Casablanca lilies. Behind her stood Elizabeth, Mother, and David. A new form of family was about to begin. The Boston sky remained as blue and beautiful as ever on that day.